So I've talked about being a member of the IWW, but I haven't really gone into depth about why I disagree with the IWW. So let's get into it. The first thing you should know about the IWW is that it's not what it was before. In the past, the IWW organized these great anti-war strikes, and their members were communists openly who supported the Soviet Union. This is absolutely no longer the case. The IWW now is an organization that believes in implementing a strategy which they believe will have success in the future because it hasn't really proven itself now. You know, the IWW's main accomplishments now are organizing a few donut shops and burger joints in Portland. You know, that's their main accomplishment. They haven't actually achieved particularly much. You know, they've done some charity work, which they call mutual aid, and they've succeeded in making themselves known and visible. They have a branch in every major city. And in fact, I found out about them because they were in my workplace. But ultimately, the effort to unionize my workplace failed after years of effort by the IWW, and they were not successful. Now, the IWW believes in being apolitical. Now, I believe that the struggle for unionizing workplaces should be political. You know, it should be a political struggle. What I mean by this is that it should reflect some sort of policy or political power, you know, revolutionary political power. It should have goals other than simply build a workers' organization, which will then push for whatever the workers within the organization decide. So the IWW does not allow, for example, bosses to be members, except maybe with exceptions, and they don't allow people who own, you know, companies or anything like that. They don't allow landlords to be members of the IWW, right? They only allow workers to be members, and then these workers are supposed to simply decide, and whatever they decide is correct. You know, whatever the people in the IWW decide is correct, is correct. These workers are supposed to then come up with the correct political line just by virtue of being workers. They don't have to read theory. They don't have to think about, you know, what's actually in the realm of possibility and produce these strategies. No, it is democracy for the sake of democracy. There is not really a strong sense of strategy. Rather, there's a sense that people want to do what they call waging the class war or engaging in class struggle, which is pretty much where they just want to attack landlords, attack bosses, and organize workers and get people to be more aware. You know, they're trying to sort of build this collective worker consciousness. But there's a lot of problems with the way that they go about this. The first is, again, the IWW's sort of democracy, which is this philosophy that our members are workers, so whatever our members decide is correct. Well, this is very silly because people are inherently going to decide what they've been conditioned to decide. And the IWW, by and large, consists of people who are more like aligned with the Democratic Party or Bernie Sanders or, you know, this kind of thing. So the IWW ends up being actually a social democratic, not revolutionary organization. And it's also a narco-syndicalist. And this means that it's supposed to organize, you know, without a definite existing political line. So every branch of the IWW is not really very centralized. See, the central body of the IWW acts as reporting, and they take information from each branch, and then they also disseminate information to each branch. They try to give them advice on how to organize unions. You know, they try to help them with things. And they take a bunch of money. I don't know what else they do. I actually don't know what else they do. But they take half of the money which goes into the organization, what they call remittance, you know, and I don't know what they do with it. I don't know where all of this money going to the central body of the IWW actually goes, because they don't have very much to show for it. And so the IWW it will, it's a narco-syndicalist, it's decentralized, and some branches are more militant fighters than other branches. For example, there was a recent controversy because they voted in their central meeting to allow no strike clauses in agreements that the IWW signs onto. And some branches took major issue with this agreement, and then those branches made a policy not to allow no strike clauses. Now, if you understand how the IWW operates and thinks, strikes are considered the only way to actually create worker power. They're considered the only way to actually do anything is through direct action. They'll always say direct action gets the goods, take action. Right? So don't advocate a political line. Don't try to talk to people in office. Don't try to do any of this. The point is that we're going to organize workers as a class, and whatever the workers decide, as in whatever the members of the IWW decide is correct, people are going to strike on this basis. We're going to organize strikes on the basis of the political line, what they're trying to organize. And by having these strikes, we will be able to dictate the policy of the government. So we should not run candidates. We should not talk about concrete political lines. Instead, we need to strong arm the state as workers to get the government to do what we want it to, anything from ending wars to implementing healthcare policy, anything like this through these mass strikes. Now, if you've studied the history of communism and the labor movement, you know that you cannot spontaneously organize strikes in this way. People don't want to do it. Strikes are something that's very drastic, and people usually do it when their back's up against the wall. They feel that they have no other choice. And getting everybody to agree on what to organize may be a very good thing. Whatever every single worker will agree on, we should organize on that basis. I agree with that idea completely. But what I don't agree with is the method by which this is achieved. Another aspect of the IWW is it's a dual-carded union. And this is something that Lenin was critical of. See, the IWW, the communist movement, right? So there was the trade unions that were tied to the Communist Party, right? But those trade unions, there were also trade unions which were not tied to the Communist Party and even opposed it, and the Communist Party would go and work within those unions. Lenin talks about this in Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder. He says we need to go within those reactionary or anti-communist or nationalist unions which are supporting wars of aggression, from the countries that they inhabit, and we need to first, on the outset, allow communists and anti-war people and internationalists to speak to oppose this sort of nationalism and also, any kind of anti-communism or anti-workerism within these unions. We need to be able to go and at least speak to advocate for it. So they advocated for free speech within these unions and democracy in these unions, and to fight within these unions. And this strategy is exactly how the Bolsheviks achieved their revolution. Now, in America, we don't have strong established unions with a lot of political influence. So I don't think it's likely that even if we go into these unions and try to fight our fight, even if we win them over, I don't think it's likely that this is going to produce some sort of revolutionary situation. We have to think a little bit more creatively, maybe think ahead and figure out, what is actually going to be the most practical strategy. But not fighting in these unions at all has not really gotten the IWW very far. Yes, again, they've made, a few unions in burger shops and donut shops and coffee shops in Portland and other, cities that have a lot of leftists in them, but they haven't really organized any sort of broad movement of workers. The workers that they really want to organize, the ones who, if they were to stop working, the economy would actually shut down, like transport workers, for example, they haven't yet organized. And even if they do, they're not going to organize them on a strong sort of communist or Leninist political basis. They reject the idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat. They reject the necessity for people's power. Again, they operate in a sort of social democratic capacity to try to strong arm the government to achieve their political aims. So even if they were to organize these people, they wouldn't be organizing them in the most effective or productive way. Now, the fact that there's so many people without a union does leave this opportunity for working, outside of existing unions because there's no union in the first place. So things have changed, meaning that dual carding is no longer the same death sentence that it was, since new unions will need to be established in the first place. But I also doubt that the IWW is going to be the one to do it. And very sadly, because of their sort of default, Democrat or social democrat alignment that the IWW has, and their lack of political education in their organization, I don't think they're going to come up with a line. I don't think they're going to calculate a strategy that is going to bring in a broad base of workers. Instead, I think they're going to appeal mostly to these leftists. And further, I question this ability to even strong arm the state. I would think that if you organize mass strikes on an issue like ending war, now this is something, if you do it without a strong political leadership, then the state is going to come in and they're going to try to break you up. They're going to create splinters. They're going to create factions. They're going to physically disable your strike. They're going to create laws like the Taft-Hartley Act, which ruin your ability to organize effective unions. They're going to, and right to work laws as well. They're going to do, the state is going to do everything they can to make it so that you can't actually organize these unions. And that's exactly what's going to happen if they actually try to strong arm the state. What they're really doing is accelerating the development of fascism, because the state is going to have to react to these things. So even if the IWW is successful, basically they're accelerating the development of fascism, and they're accelerating this need for the state to crack down on these unions and probably create a more fascist form of government, similar to the one we have now, but more totalitarian in dictating what unions can and cannot do, or possibly even disable the ability to create independent unions completely and have a state union which controls everything. Now, that is what China does, but the way that China does it is different because it's actually a part of the government. It's not simply a top-down institution designed to undermine labor like it would be in a sort of fascist state. And, class struggle for the sake of class struggle, right? We simply need to hate bosses and landlords and owners and capitalists and express our hatred in the streets, hold signs and yell and organize things to sort of raise awareness. Well, what you're really doing then is creating a different type of protest cage. As much as the people in the IWW tend to hate the protest cage and hate people that just go yelling in the streets, declaring their political line, the IWW is instead going in front of workplaces, yelling in the streets and declaring their political line to no particular effect. I understand it's much more effective and meaningful when you're protesting for a particular thing, like, for example, we want higher wages, or we want to create a union in this particular workplace. This is a lot more concrete and meaningful and possible. It's actually working towards an end which may actually be possible. And that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, if you're not creating this broad movement that you're trying to create, then all you're doing is making a political show, and you're kind of hoping that you're going to lead, maybe through what they think of as propaganda of the deed, but you're going to sort of lead people to create bigger and bigger things. So, for example, if the IWW, has been making these statements about unionism and advocating the creation of unions and making their small little unions, then when Amazon workers go to unionize, which they do, of course, with the help and support of big established unions, which are much more conservative unions that are not going to have any revolutionary potential, But when they go and organize these unions, then the IWW is going to claim credit for it. They're going to say, we did that, we're the ones that have always been pushing, we knew that this was the right thing. And in a sense, this is a sort of political line. There is no such thing as action that doesn't carry some sort of ideological message. And this is something the IWW needs to reckon with. See, they act as though they are fighting a non-ideological battle. They act as though direct action is simply a direct expression of class interest without a political character. But even, for example, the definition of the working class, the idea that the working class is somehow one, somehow unified, and whatever the workers in the IWW decide on is correct, all of these ideas are inherently political and ideological, whether or not they want to recognize that. And there's a lot more that I want to talk about with the IWW, but much of that breaks down to my own personal experience being a member for about a year and a half and trying to unionize my own workplace, which now that I no longer work for them and now that I sort of renounce, those tactics of organizing, right? Because I don't want future employers to think that I'm going to try and organize a militant union in their workplace, right? I can actually go and talk about that. I can actually talk about my experiences, and I plan on making a good long video talking about that. But in this particular video, I just wanted to go over my main disagreements with the IWW and reasons why I think that it is going to fail.
This has been Hertz from Bismuth. Remember to like the video if you like it, dislike if you don't like it. Comment if you have something to add, maybe I missed something. Subscribe for more, and share this video around so that other people can get the message. See you next time.